Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. It's me, the South African Wanderer, and today we've got a little bit of a technical video. Got a lens in this bag, and I want to quickly tell you about and give a quick review of in the 8 months that I've been using it. So this is the Sony 14mm f1.8 G lens. I got this lens in November last year. Sony was having their Black Friday specials, and I had a 16 to 35mm f4 Canon lens that I was using up to that point for my wide angle work that I decided to trade in and get this lens, by making up the difference in the cost. I think it cost me about 8,000 Rand to get this after the trade-in for that 16 to 35mm lens. And there's a couple of reasons why I went with the 14mm f1.8 and not the Sony 16 to 35mm. I think the major reason was that the 16 to 35mm is much more expensive. I think double the price of what this was on special. So that was a big driving factor. And then secondly, I didn't feel the need for that zoom range, so 16 to 35. And I knew that I would mostly be using this for landscapes and night photography. So getting the 14mm focal length and the f1.8 aperture actually made sense to just go for the 14mm, because the 16 to 35, I think you only get a f2.8 on the G lens. So before we get into more specifics on the lens itself, let's take a closer look of the lens and its features, and then we'll talk about the rest. Okay guys, let's take a look at the lens a little bit closer, just by itself. So this is the lens. As you can see, it's not very big in my hand. I don't have the biggest hands anyway, but it's quite light as well. 460 grams, I think it is. So it has the aperture ring on the body that you can change, from 1.8 to 16 or to automatic, and you can then switch the click off and on. So if it's off, it's just smooth. If it's on, it's not an actual click. You don't hear an audible click, but when you moving the ring, you can actually feel it with your hand. I like to keep it on just in case I do bump the aperture ring. Then you've got your autofocus manual focus button, and then you've got a memory button that you can program. I haven't programmed it. So it comes with this hood that Sony sends standard, because that's there to protect this bulbous front. So if I tilt it a little bit, you can see that the front is not flat. It's got a bulbous front because it's wide angle. So finding filters that fit on the front of this is a little bit harder. So what they do is it's got a back filter holder. So this is the back element of the lens, and you can get cutouts for the back of the lens and slide them into that sort of plastic outlay there, and use filters on this lens that way. So yeah, quite a compact unit. I'll just put it on my A1 quickly, and you can see how it looks when it's mounted on the camera. So here's the 14mm lens on my A1, quite well balanced when it's in your hand. My A1's a bit dirty, so don't mind that. Got a lot of use. So because the lens is so small, you can use the mounting screw on the camera body and it'll still be well balanced on a tripod. So it's quite an easy lens to have mounted on the camera body and to, carry around and play around with. So one thing I didn't mention in that close-up video is it does come with this bag, which is very convenient for transporting the lens, because the lens then just fits in the lens bag, and then you can be off, slip this into your normal camera kit bag and be off from it. So why 14mm? If you did physics in school, you would know that lenses in general either converge light to a point or diverge light away. So think of magnifying glass and how you would use that to concentrate the sunlight onto a point and start a fire by holding the magnifying glass a certain distance away. That one single lens then converges the light onto the paper into a smaller point source and cause the fire. Just like that, the lens on your camera will work in a similar way, where they will converge light onto the camera sensor that's in your camera body, sort of behind the lens. So they will converge light that they see onto that camera sensor. And how strongly or how poorly, let me say, they converge light is how they are almost measured. So 14mm is a low number, so it's not a very strong convergence. So it's taking a very wide view and converging it onto your camera sensor. My 200 to 600, for instance, the 600mm is a very strongly convergent lens, but it's a very narrow field of view, so it will take something that's very small and far away and make it bigger in the frame or onto the camera sensor, let me say. There is an image, I can probably search an image from Google that then will explain how that works and the fields of view. I think at 14mm the field of view is 114 degrees. So if you think that 180 degrees is flat, the human eyes can't really do 180 degrees. Maybe chameleons can do more than that. But this is flat on the plane of the eye, and then you're just converging. I think the 14mm does about 114 degrees. If I remember the diagram correctly, your 600mm does 4 degrees. So it's a very small field of view, but a very, so it magnifies small things from far away. That's why you use a 600mm for birding, for instance. So my 200-600 is the lens I use when I'm out birding. So I have been using this lens for some landscape shots. When I got out to the Kruger, I took some test shots. I took a shot with this 14mm, and I took the same shot with the 24mm just to compare, that field of view and how much wider this 14mm is. And then what I did is also sitting in Shingwedzi at night. The Milky Way was above us, so I did a comparison of the advantages of the F1.8. So shooting with the F4, I had to shoot much higher ISOs to get the image exposed like I would want it to be, so that we can see, for instance, the Milky Way and things like that. Whereas if you're shooting with the 14mm and if you shoot it at the F1.8, the ISO you require is much lower. And the advantage of this is that the lower ISO means that you can have less noise in your image, so it does lend for a crisper image. You can also then step down the aperture to f2.8, for instance, where the lens will then be sharper and still get more light in than if I was using my f4 lens. So then I would use lower ISOs and get similar exposures, let me say. So I did a series of shots that hopefully will explain that. What you can do instead of using a super wide angle like this 14mm is take vertical panoramas with a more telephoto lens. So if, for instance, I've got my 50mm f1.8, I could then take 7 or 8 shots, vertical shots with that 50mm, and possibly then stitch them together and get a wider angle of view. So for astrophotography, in particular, shooting wide, from the start has its advantages. If you remember when we went out to Marievale to shoot the Milky Way about last year, this time I would say, I would have mentioned that you need to use the 500 rule, where you take 500 and you divide by the focal length of the lens to get the number of seconds you can expose for before getting the movement of the stars showing up in your image. So for instance, with 24mm, if you use that rule, the maximum exposure you should be doing is about 20 seconds before you'll see stars having tails on them. Whereas with the 14mm, you can expose for 35 seconds before you can actually get the tails coming in on those stars. So you can actually then shoot comfortably, for 30 seconds if you don't have the bulb mode activated on your camera, and even shoot at the f2.8 that 24mm lens is, but still use lower ISOs and get cleaner images, let me say. So then shooting vertical panoramas, with a longer focal length lens can be problematic in that your exposure, for instance, for a 35mm is so much shorter. You just got about 15 seconds with a 35mm before you start seeing the tails. So even if you're shooting 7 or 8 vertical panorama shots, you're going to have to use a much higher ISO to get the similar exposure that the 14mm will give you in a single shot almost. So yeah, there are some advantages of having a little bit of a wider angle lens. And then, I've been using it for other photography as well. I've shot some architecture with it. So my brother was renovating an apartment and he asked me to do before and after photos with it. So I use this lens to get that, so that you can see the whole room in one image, looking across from the lounge into the kitchen, for instance. And then also I've shot event photography where I was in an auditorium and shot with this lens on my second camera body, so that I could capture the audience looking at the speaker, and get those wide angle shots that make for a little bit more of an environmental shot in a closed space, that gives you some perspective of perhaps what's going on. So as much as the motivation for this lens was shooting astro and shooting landscapes with it, I have been using it for other photography as well. I would stay away from shooting people with this because of the distortions and things like that. But I think that leads us into the video aspects of this. So I did some quick vlogging video with this in the backyard, which I'll put in now.
Okay guys, so for the video test, we're just going to start off by testing how good a vlogging lens the 14mm is. But to start off with, I'm just going to show you the 24mm f2.8 that I normally use. So I'm just going to hand hold it at arm's length away so you can see, you know, how wide it is and how well it focuses on my face and things like that. I've got it set at f3.5 and 1/640th of a second, just to get me well exposed, but the background is going to be overexposed. So this is the 24mm f2.8. We're just going to switch to the 14mm now. So I've got the 14mm on now. Same settings in terms of the video settings, in terms of the shutter speed and the aperture, but I'm still holding it you know, at arm's length away. But you can see I'm much smaller in the frame now. I get much more of the background, which is my garden. Still shooting at f3.5, but maybe a little bit more in focus because of the wider angle lens in terms of the background. The background is obviously overexposed as well. A little bit of a heavier lens, so a little bit harder to hold steady when you're filming. But what the wider angle then does allow is for you to stabilize in post and crop in on the image. So I'll try to do that with this clip, and you can see how far you can take it then. So I'd say, you know, the wide angle does give you a little bit more optionality in terms of your vlogging. If you've got a tripod or something like that, you can capture more of your environment. The problem is then you are a little bit smaller in the image. You can, you know, bring it a little bit closer, the camera a little bit closer, and rest your arm a little bit more if you're doing long vlogs. The problem is if you move off to the sides, then possibly the distortion gets a little bit more, so my big head gets even a bit bigger with the distortion. But that's the giveaway when you use a wide angle lens. So I wouldn't really use this lens for vlogging. I would stick to my 24mm. I think the ideal focal length would be about 20mm. If you can get a good 20mm, maybe f2.8, that will be ideal.
Yeah, I don't think I would recommend this lens in particular for vlogging because of the distortion that it can give. But if you've got a crop sensor body, if you're shooting, for instance, the FX30, which is a crop sensor video camera in the Sony range, you would want something like this if you're planning to do vlogging with it, because then the wider angle gives you, you know, a little bit more of the environment, and you're not, it's just not, you know, your head in the environment. So there are instances where this lens could be used for a vlogging lens as well. Like I said, I got this in November last year, so I've been shooting with it for the last 8 months. And I must say that from a review perspective, I've got no complaints with this lens. Very versatile. I've made great use of it in the 8 months that I've had it. You know, sometimes what happens is you get these lenses, these super wide angle lenses, and they have very niche applications, and then they end up sitting and gathering dust. But I've taken this out with me whenever I've been, you know, out anywhere, even when I went down to Durban a couple of weeks back, in the hope that I could get some landscape shots of Shlanga Rocks and of the pier at the Moyo at Ushaka, but I wasn't able to get out in time for the sunrise. We went chasing the sardines instead. But yeah, I'm like I said, I'm very happy with this lens. I've got no complaints about the lens. I think it's a very good lens to have in your bag if you are out in nature. And yeah, for now, I'm very happy and I'll keep shooting with it. And hopefully you'll see more shots from it as well going forward. Hopefully we'll get out and do some proper astro sometime soon, and get some full use of this very versatile lens, I would say. So yeah, that's me signing off for now, and we shall catch you on the next one.